Retro Hangover, supported via Patreon by listeners like you. We would especially like to thank patrons Lyle, McKarns, Ashton, Ruby, Randall, Quiggle, Tony G, Studstill Smash, the Milkman, Katie, Quigg, Paul, Romalho, Raging Demon, JC, Meagan, Caruso, MaskedKeaton, Andrew Liguori, Ozzy Garcia, the Retro Vixen, Adam from the Good, the Bad, and the Backlog, Thunderdome Gaming Society, Dischimera, Jenny E, Rick Firestone, Keith Gasper, Dave Jackson, Eric Gess, Kayla Jackson, Nomad from the Retro Wildlands, and Ash Events. Your continued engagement and generous donations are deeply appreciated.
Open your ears and crack some beers. You are listening to the most recent episode of Retro Hangover.
Hello, retro and classic gamers. Welcome to the podcast where we stare starry sin, swallowing sweet sweat scintillatingly. This is Retro Hangover. I am your co-host, Chris Copleen, with special guest Keith Gasper from the Main Quest podcast. And, as always, your host, Shane. Soul-stealing Dick Koski.
That's right. You got that eggplant so good it steal your soul.
Just sucks it right out.
I like how both Shane and I just naturally leaned back in our chair to make sure that the audio didn't bleed through our headphones.
Listen, it's happened before, okay? The bleed is real.
It's a bleeding dick dragon.
It was like it came naturally to both of us.
Right. It's not my first rodeo. I've been here a while.
Professional podcasting over here.
I turn away from the mic to breathe.
I want to hear about how a veiny dick dragon is bleeding, because that means it's. Now I have that mental image. I hope I put that in yours too.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
How are you both doing? Welcome back to the show, Keith.
Oh yeah. Hey, I'm back.
Shit.
Sorry. I'm really tired.
Welcome back to the United States, Shane.
Oh yeah. Thank you. I was thinking about that. I'm like, this would not make any sense to the listeners, because as far as you are concerned, I never left, but I have in fact been gone for like a month. So I'm getting back into the swing of things here. And what better way to get back into the good US of A than with an immediate dentist appointment to get fillings? I can't think of a better re-entry. Boy, I'm so glad to be back.
It only would have been better if they gave you a gun when you left.
your complimentary dental gun.
It shoots the sound of a screaming eagle. Just every single shot.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be back. I've mostly readjusted. Of course I say that, but at the time of recording, the last night I basically just did not go to sleep and tried to pull an all-nighter because my like circadian rhythm has just been completely and utterly fucked from all of the travel. So I think I'm still on like Hawaii time. So like I want to go to bed and actually fall asleep at like 4 a.m., which is not conducive to a normal schedule. So that's neat. But here I am.
I just want to go to sleep all the time anyway. So
yeah,
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I feel you. I'm like a cat.
That's
how that works.
I am jealous of my cats. If only I could have their lives.
It'd be hard to play video games with those paws.
That's true. The lack of opposable thumbs would pose a little bit of a problem. But, you know, I got to be honest, this might be sacrilege for a video game podcast, but I kind of feel like weighing the pros and cons, I feel like maybe giving up thumbs would be worth not having to give a shit about things like taxes.
I feel that. Yeah.
I think you might be right. You might be onto something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same vibe. Mm-hmm. Well, they have a bunch of accessibility options for as far as controllers go, so
That's true.
still might be in luck.
There we go.
People can beat games with their chin, so I'm pretty sure you can make it through a game as a cat.
Yeah, I think I saw somebody beat Elden Ring on one of those Donkey Kong Congo drums with their feet or something.
Dude, fuck off.
Especially their feet. Shout out to List Off
That's
Podcast.
so unnecessary. We're over here struggling with just a basic ass controller, and these motherfuckers are just like, I beat it with bongos. Get the fuck out of here.
As we are a video game podcast, I suppose we should get to the video games, which today we are going to be talking about Castlevania, Aria of Sorrow,
Hell yeah.
which we did not play with our feet or bongos.
As far as you know.
As far as I know.
I did beat it with a Guitar Hero controller, though.
Oh, okay. Next is Guitar Hero with your feet.
Yeah, I was going to say, in a way, I kind of feel like that's like strangely apropos, just given like the general vibe of like Igavanias and Iga himself, actually. I feel like beating Castlevania with a guitar controller just seems like appropriate.
I never looked at a picture of Igarashi before until I did some research for this episode, and that dude looks like a vampire.
Yep.
He does. He definitely does. And he leans into it too. Shane, I did think you were going to say that Iga is a foot guy.
I mean,
he might be.
I don't know. He might be. Maybe.
Aren't all vampires?
Is this canonical? Am I not aware of this? Like they can't cross running water and they're also just super into toes. Did I miss this memo?
Yeah, I mean, there's veins like under the nail of
God, no.
Jesus,
I don't.
Shut up.
Why? You're like the Nom vet who talks about the bamboo shoots under the fingernails.
Stop.
Like, fuck off.
All right, let's get into what games we've been playing lately before we talk about the game du jour. And as we are wont to do, we start out with our esteemed guest, Keith. So, Keith, what video games have you been playing lately?
So, I finally picked up Hogwarts Legacy. I bought this game for my girlfriend. She's a huge Harry Potter fan. And I watched her play it. She beat it a while ago. She's still doing like post-game stuff. And I'm kind of in this space where I'm really not sure what I want to play. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to finally play this. And I know she's probably going to be listening to this episode. Hello, Kayla.
Hi.
So I have to be very careful about what I say about this game. I don't know shit about Harry Potter. I might be able to name like 3 other characters not named Harry Potter in that franchise. Maybe. So Hogwarts Legacy is a aggressively okay open world game.
What? You're saying that it's largely driven by the strength of its IP? That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never heard of a case like that before.
And I will say, watching her play it, I am incredibly excited for her when she does play it. She's totally fucking into it. She sees all these little clues dropped all over the place to the IP and stuff that I would just never even pick up on. But as a video game, I mean, this is just every open world game that has come out the past 10 years. Like, the formula is out in the open and people are just making open world games with it. And that's what this is. So yeah, I mean, there's really nothing terribly wrong with it. It's just, it's weird that I'm playing it, and I'm kind of wondering when I'm going to drop off of it, because this is one of those games that I have been known to complain about, like these type of AAA games where it's just so polished and almost seems like it has no soul to it. Only because I'm not familiar with the IP. I'm sure there's tons of heart in it and tons of fan service and stuff like that. That has no connection with me, so I'm just kind of like, well, this certainly is an open world game.
So I'm curious, when you say it's kind of like a just run of the mill sort of open, are we talking like on the spectrum of literally any Ubisoft game and Elden Ring? Like, where on the spectrum does this game fall? Because I still kind of want to play it because I do know enough about Harry Potter to be interested in it, but like I have not yet, so I haven't really seen like anything about it so far.
There are no Ubisoft towers.
That's good.
As far as I know, I haven't, watching her play it, I have definitely not seen her do any type of like, oh, now I'm opening up this part of the map and clearing the fog of war. Nothing like that. As far as Elden Ring goes and like Breath of the Wild, like that style of exploration, it's a little more, I don't want to say linear, but it's definitely like the hub world. You start out at like the tutorial area is Hogwarts. And then kind of as you go through the main quests, you start branching out further out into the world and get out there. It's a pretty big map, all things said. I haven't gotten that far in it personally. I get a lot of my experience with it is secondhand at this point. But I mean, it's all there. I mean, it's you start out in Hogwarts and you're going to do a ton of side quests. It's, oh, hey, this person is missing. Can you go find them? Or, oh, I happen to lose my goats. Can you go gather my goats and bring them here? It's, yeah, sure, why not? The main quests are slowly introducing, your magic spells and stuff like that. The plot is unfolding, and then as the map gets larger and larger, you start getting little points of interest all over the map. You've got you're constantly unlocking fast travel, all that stuff. So it's literally every game that has been made like the past 10 years or so. So
what happened to the goats?
The one thing it does not have, which I'm really surprised by, it doesn't have any skill trees. Like when you level up, you are just leveling up. And they do have loot that changes your stats. That kind of helps as well. At some point, your character ends up looking really fucking ridiculous. Like,
as one should.
Yeah, like at my girlfriend's file, like she's wearing like these weird cat eyes, but like the skin around the eyes have scales like lizards, like a lizard scale, like a dick dragon.
Ah, right. Yeah.
Oh,
so
I'm sure she'll appreciate that comparison.
very much so.
Yeah.
But I mean, her defense is outrageous. So
Sounds like the classic like MMO problem of just like, well, this looks like a fucking clown suit, but the stats are really good. So okay, got it.
But yeah, I mean, it's fine. I'm just not sure if it's for me,
Fair enough. Shane,
Yes.
you've had some time in countries far, far away, but did you have time to get down and dirty with some games?
Down with the sickness.
I hope not.
Yeah. So kind of, funny story about that. The only thing I brought with me other than like, obviously my phone was my 3DS. That's the only gaming console I brought. I didn't bring my Switch. I didn't bring my Steam Deck, just my 3DS, because prior to leaving, I may or may not have acquired a large amount of games, both entirely legally and otherwise. I might,
Of course.
I would like to add. And so I was like, you know what? I got plenty of stuff on here. I'll just bring this. It's nice, compact, that works. And it would have worked if halfway through like the flight to Australia, it would have appeared that my charger just gave out. I actually installed our game du jour on my 3DS. One of the many benefits of sailing the high seas.
Yar.
My intention was to do another playthrough of this game while on the plane, because it's like a 14-hour flight or some ridiculous bullshit. So I was like, all right, well, I'll have plenty of time to play this. And I did get a good chunk of time in on it, all said and done. But like I said, for some reason, my 3DS like wouldn't charge. And I assumed it was the charger that went bad. I later found out once I got back home that no, the charger was fine. It's just that apparently every airline ever just has complete garbage for like charging outlets, and like at least half of them are just broken. So that's neat. I'm glad I paid so much money to fly and have things that don't work. It was like the same thing with the USB charging outlets. It was like the one that I got, I had to hold my USB charger like down so that it would touch just the right way
pressure
to get it to charge. So fucking stupid. But anyway, so the good news is my charger for my 3DS is fine.
Right.
Bad news is I went a very long stretch of not being able to play anything on my 3DS because it was basically dead and I thought I couldn't charge it. So did not do as much as I wanted to, but I got a lot of time in on Aria of Sorrow. And besides that, honestly, lately it's just been a lot of like just keeping up with a few of like the mobile games I had on my phone while I was gone. And more recently, the latest MiHoYo joint dropped in Honkai Star Rail. So I've started playing that to check it out. And I'm happy to say that it's pretty good. Like, it's actually, if you were to take, and for those of you who are not familiar, same company that does Genshin Impact. But this one is more of a traditional JRPG in that it is 100% turn-based. Like, all the combat is traditional turn-based RPG combat. You have a 4-member party that you can sort of mix and match from a pretty decent roster of characters. The obvious and unfortunate downside is that because it is from the people who do Genshin, it is also a gachapon game, because of course it is. So the way to get characters is to do pulls on banners and all that bullshit. The good thing, though, is that it has been confirmed by people who have played through the beta and have like no-lifed their way through the actual 1.0 release, because the game's only been out for like a week, that you like 100% can actually do the entire story of the game with just being a free-to-play player with just the characters that you get. And with like,
That's pretty cool.
Whatever random pulls that you get from the currency they give you. So that's nice. So that's a very long way of saying that like, it's actually kind of worth your time. Like, even if you don't like the gacha thing, because most people don't, I'm not a huge fan either, but I get sucked into it. Stripping that away from it, you are still left with actually like a super high production quality turn-based JRPG with a pretty good story and like really good voice acting, and the writing is actually fantastic. Like, it's much better than Genshin's writing. So I've been enjoying it so far. It's like cross-platform, so you can play on PC, mobile. There's going to be a PS5/PS4 release coming pretty soon. So you can pretty much play it anywhere. So I don't know. I would actually kind of recommend it. I'm not one to usually recommend free-to-play gacha games necessarily, but like I said, you basically are getting a full ass JRPG game out of this for basically no dollars. So, you know, why not?
Nice.
But yeah, that's really just been it for me so far. I'm just catching up on stuff. I don't know. What about you, Chris? You had like a whole month without me here. So
I did.
what were you doing to keep yourself busy and not miss me?
Well, I think the last thing I remember playing before you left and we did a recording was Final Fantasy 13. So I hadn't really started anything else yet. So after you left, I started Ys 8 and beat it. I started Final Fantasy 10 and beat it. Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Brothers 3, which I played on stream and is not on YouTube because I melted down. Yeah. Are you laughing at the naming convention?
Yeah, which one is that?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Brothers 3. Great way to name it. I see why you went to new Nintendo. It makes sense. Then I started playing Ys 9 so I could just cap off all the Ys games, just be done with it. So just going in that order, Ys 8, if you like action RPGs and you're at all attracted to anime, go play that. Like, now. It is fantastic. It is a great game.
Attracted to anime how, Chris?
Well, like...
Yeah, like sexually.
Well, I mean, I'm sure they would get a kick out of it too. And there's nothing wrong with being attracted to anime sexy girls. I tend to dabble from time to... Well, no, I do not. But if you do, that's completely fine.
Go on.
If you like, I'll just say if you like anime. It's Nihon Falcom. So if you've ever played any of the Legend of Heroes Trails from Cold Steel games that use that graphical style, it was directed and made by the same people, essentially. It has that look to it. It was originally a Vita game, and that means it should probably run good on your Switch. I heard it probably doesn't, but I played on the PS4. It runs great. I had a fantastic time with it, and I already did a rapid fire review of it, and I'm probably going to be recording a Gaiden with Tony G, who has been on our Gaidens before, because he dipped into it, and he said he loved it too. I'm going to find out when I record with him, but yeah, go play that if you like action RPGs with a anime element to it. Final Fantasy X's Final Fantasy X. It made me feel like I was a kid again, and I loved it. But Shane, I finally understood what you meant by the voice acting. Voice acting itself, like, wasn't bad. It was just very weirdly directed. That was mostly the issue I saw with it. Like you'll be having a conversation, all of a sudden it's time for Una to talk, and Una's just like, okay. It's like that was I think it's supposed to be a little bit more emotional, and she's just like, yeah. Huh. And then it says like Titus, which stupid fucking name. It should be Titus. It says like hi, and it's like he goes, eh. Like that's not hi.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting choice of direction there, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I played way too much Blitzball. I used to like it a lot more. I ended up not liking it as much by the time I was done with it, but great time Final Fantasy X. I'm not going to talk about Super Mario Brothers 3 because I think I've done that enough here for the both of us. Makes us quite controversial, I would think, at this point. But
what if you could save your game, Chris, in Super Mario Brothers 3? What if?
It'd be far more tolerable.
Oh, okay.
Far more tolerable. I'll just wrap it up with East 9 and just say I'll probably be talking about on the next episode. But do you guys know who Chris Reigns is?
Is that a wrestler?
No.
Okay.
Keith, you know who Chris Reigns is?
I think that's Roman Reigns.
Oh,
yeah, that's
right,
Roman Reigns.
that.
Yeah. So Chris Reigns, it was Garth Brooks' alternate identity.
Oh, right. His like weird emo soul patch guy.
His alter
What
ego.
in the world?
Yeah.
That's what I feel like East 9 would be if East 9 was a person.
That's wow. Okay. That's like a real specific deep cut comparison, but I'm here for it.
I think it's apt. And I will be here next time on our next recording to give another update, and if I continue to feel that way. I'm sure there's people out there right now wondering why we're waffling so much because we've gotten that before.
Nah,
and probably pretty apt.
I'll say they left.
Yeah, they probably have.
Fun fact. Did you know that you shouldn't be using airport chargers anyway because people are encrypting the USB chargers and getting into people's phones?
I did not know that, but thanks.
Just something else to worry about while you're at the airport.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thank you, Keith. I appreciate that.
Comforting.
Yeah. Though I guess I shouldn't be surprised.
I would not be surprised by any trickery. I'd be kind of weird. Like, I don't want to charge my 2DS, my pirated 2DS. Why? Because they might hack into it. To be really bad.
They'll steal all the things that I already hacked onto this 3DS.
Yeah. They're stealing all the things I stole.
Speaking about stealing stuff, we're talking about a game where you steal souls
Ooh.
in Castlevania, Aria of Sorrow. And guess what? We have a brief history that we're going to get into here. And to give us that brief history, we have someone with a very sultry and luxurious voice in our host, the Dick Dragon himself, Shane Koski. So Shane, why don't you take us away to No, I don't know where we're at. Tokyo, Transylvania, somewhere in the moon or something like that.
The moon.
Transsexual Transylvania.
Transylmunia.
There you go.
And give us a brief history on Castlevania, Aria of Sorrow.
Most times, a video game series will receive far more praise for its home console releases than any output it might have on portable platforms. This assertion holds true even for the standouts of the 8 and 16-bit era, who arguably had some stellar handheld entries. Castlevania, however, would come to buck that trend and truly solidify itself as a tentpole franchise. At least for a while. Thanks to releases on Nintendo's Game Boy Advance system. After becoming well established in the hearts and minds of gamers with its action platformer releases on the NES and SNES, the Castlevania series was whipped into the mainstream consciousness with 1997's Symphony of the Night. Thanks to a clever turn of phrase by OneUp.com writers Scott Sharkey and Jeremy Parrish, Symphony would also become responsible for the birth of the now ubiquitous term Metroidvania. Needless to say, the franchise had found a winning formula, and Konami would not sit idly by and let a good thing go to waste. My, how times have changed. But Shane, I hear you exclaim, you were all on about portable games when Symphony of the Night was a PlayStation release. what gives? And your skepticism would be well-founded, if not a bit premature. See, the inevitable follow-up effort to the 1997 classic would in fact be the first of the aforementioned GBA releases, dubbed Circle of the Moon. While this launch title for the Game Boy successor would receive a fair amount of praise, it faced substantial criticism for being too dark on a system that had no built-in backlight. Despite this, Circle would still see enough success to warrant further releases, paving the way for the likes of Harmony of Dissonance and today's spotlight piece, Aria of Sorrow, rounding out a formidable trilogy of vamp-slaying action for Nintendo's handheld heavyweight. Both of these games would begin development at roughly the same time, resulting in Aria borrowing many elements from Harmony and vice versa. Aria, however, would prove to be the bolder of the pair, deviating more from the now established formula and introducing some fresh ideas while building upon and improving past successes. To wit, in a series first, the setting would take place in the near future year of 2035, rather than the typical 18th and 19th century settings of previous entries. Additionally, the main protagonist, Soma Cruz, would begin their ghoul-bashing journey in Japan, rather than somewhere in Eastern Europe. Koji Igarashi, producer of the series at this point, would invite Symphony of the Night artist Ayama Kojima back to do character design, and Symphony's music composer Michiru Yamane, after learning the music for Harmony of Dissonance, was not received well, which seems unfortunately apropos given the game's title. Aria of Sorrow was initially unveiled on January 16, 2003 at a Konami press conference in San Francisco by none other than Igarashi himself. The release date would be soon to follow, with the game hitting shelves in North America on May 6th of the same year, and Japan and Europe receiving the game on May 8th and 9th, respectively. Critics were quick to lavish Aria with praise, with Famitsu giving it a 36 out of 40, the highest rating the publication would give to any Castlevania game to date. Reviewers loved its tactical soul system, in which a player would gain abilities obtained from defeated enemies. High marks were also given to the game's graphical presentation for its detailed sprites and smooth animations. Oddly, this adoration didn't necessarily translate into commercial success. Japan would only see 27,000 units sold in its first month, whereas the US, while far more successful and not a terrible showing overall, would see the game move around 160,000 units. With lackluster sales, the critical acclaim would seemingly be enough to greenlight a direct sequel on the Nintendo DS with Dawn of Sorrow. The DS would enjoy two more Metroidvania-style Castlevanias in Portrait of Ruin and Order of Ecclesia. For those who have played Aria of Sorrow, it almost invariably remains at the top of their Castlevania tier lists, which is not terribly surprising, given that many consider the two portable trilogies to be the definitive peak of the series overall, with Aria perched upon the very pinnacle. And that is your brief history of Castlevania Aria of Sorrow.
All right, thank you, Shane, for that brief history. Gotta admit, I got excited when you said premature, and then I realized you're talking about video games, and I realized I wasn't being attacked. So at least I cleared that up in my own mind.
You're safe for now.
I know. No one's going to find out. But I did not realize that Aria of Sorrow sold that poorly in Japan. While looking this up, everyone talks about the Game Boy Advance releases, like having this tremendous legacy, and everyone claims to remember them. But it doesn't seem like a ton of people played them, which I think is rather odd. And I'm not that doesn't speak to what I think the game's quality is. It feels a little off that a game with such a magnitude of a legacy just didn't move units.
Yeah, that was really wild to me reading that. I would have never guessed that. And I have to kind of wonder why. Like, I don't know if it's just because you got to figure if you're talking about Aria of Sorrow in particular, right? That was the third and final release for the GBA.
Mm-hmm.
So is it just burnout? Or, is it maybe people were just not interested in that style of game by that point? I don't know. It's a really interesting number, though.
Do you guys know how well Symphony of the Night did in Japan?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because Castlevania has a history of not doing very well over there and doing better here. And I don't know why that is.
Yeah, me neither.
Because I know the original NES games took a lot of inspiration from like American 1940s horror movies like Bela Lugosi, Frankenstein type of shit.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that is what obviously like kids were wanting in the 1980s where they're just like, hell yeah, the werewolf man or the wolf man or whatever. Like I want that in my video game. I mean, maybe they were, but I don't think that was ultimately what was pushing Castlevania over the edge here in the US back then. So I'm curious how well Symphony of the Night did.
I'm not sure. I know it did at least well enough in Konami's eyes that they released a Japanese exclusive Saturn port of it. So it couldn't have done like terrible. I know when you talk about like the Castlevania series as a whole, the best-selling game from the series is, what's the one for the 360 PS3? God of Castlevania of the Colossus.
Oh, Lords of Shadow?
Lords of Shadow. That's one.
Really? That's the best-selling one?
Yes.
Woof.
That's the best-selling game in the series. And the second best-selling game in the series is the original Castlevania. I know it's one of those.
That's fucking wild. What? Those aren't even the good ones.
Excuse you. Watch your mouth.
No,
Yeah.
no. You know what? No,
This is
I will
my
not.
show now.
I will not be excused.
I like the original one.
It's not good. But anyway,
Yeah, it's weird. Just like it's a series with just such reverence, and it's just like, well, how did it sell? It didn't. Oh, okay. So yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, Symphony of the Night did well enough, but again, like 160,000 units might sound like a lot, but you have to remember how massive the GBA was.
yeah,
It just seems like everyone talks about this game. It's just really weird.
yeah. I was about to say, 160,000 units actually doesn't sound like a lot, especially when you think about the install base
Right.
of the GBA. Now that's the other thing. I mean, I would imagine that the install base in Japan was probably sizable. I mean, it's fucking Nintendo, right? Like it would have to be. I
Yeah.
would think.
And they love their portable systems.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Well, here's the thing too. A lot of console gamers, handheld gaming was like kind of stigmatized by a lot of people that were playing console games. So for Castlevania to go from consoles to handhelds, I'm not sure a lot of people who were playing the original couple of games were going to go jump out and get a GBA to play a new Castlevania game.
Yeah, it just seems like if you had a GBA, though, you would pick up a Castlevania game, especially with as well praised as they were. I understand you wouldn't buy a GBA for Castlevania, but it seems like you would buy Castlevania if you had a GBA. That's the weird thing. That's more where I'm coming from. I might be wrong on that because I guess you're right. It is a console experience, but I'd have to look up the sales numbers. I think those poorly named Super Mario Advance games sold pretty well, and those are console experiences.
Yeah, I guess that's interesting to think about because nowadays, and I mean, it's a little less so now because I think enough time's passed, but it's sort of the same thing with like mobile gaming. For the longest time, most gamers, TM, would like look at mobile gaming as like not quote unquote real gaming. So that's interesting to think about because like now there's no question, right? That we're just like,
Right.
oh yeah, it's a handheld gaming platform. Like, yes, of course that's legitimate. But then I guess maybe back then, maybe that same stigma applied before cell phones came along to take all of that ire away, I guess. I don't know.
Thank you, cell phones. Mobile gaming is our savior. Don't you all have phones? Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does it still hurt?
It's always going to hurt just a little bit.
So because you are personally hurt, I think it's a good time to talk about our personal experiences with Castlevania.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Aria of Sorrow. So I guess I'm going to start again with you, Keith. Did you have any personal experiences? What is the personal experience with this game?
None.
Oh, right. Thank you.
Wow. Great. Why did we have him on again? What?
So I have never been a person that was into handheld games. Maybe I was a shitty teenager and was like, man, these handheld games certainly aren't anything to play because console games are where it's at. No, I don't think I was. I just wasn't into handheld games. And when I think about it too, past like 1997, I didn't really know that they were still making Castlevania games, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't until like, I don't know, maybe like 10 years ago when I was like, oh, there's all these Castlevania games that have been coming out. There's these Xbox 360 games. Let me see what these are about. And I'm like, oh, I certainly don't want to play those. So maybe Castlevania post Symphony of the Night is not for me, which, by the way, I still have not played Symphony of the Night. So I picked up the Konami collection of this, or Castlevania collection, whatever you want to call it, on the Switch. It was like 2 years ago or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a minute now, yeah.
And then I finally played it for the first time last year. I actually played all three of them. I played Circle of the Moon, I played through Harmony of Dissonance, and I played this all in order. Not to give too much of my thoughts away, but I think in that order is like the order of quality that these games are in. It goes from bad to good to, well, we'll get there. So
okay. Hold on. Like Circle of the Moon's not bad.
it
Circle's
has some
fine.
good ideas, but compared to the other two, it's the lesser of the three.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So-
Well, and you're 100% right. I mean, they kind of build on each other.
Yeah, right.
Aria of Sorrow is like the FF9 of like Castlevania games, in that it's like the culmination of like everything they learned from the previous games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say I like Harmony of Dissonance more than this game.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Huh.
Okay.
Okay.
But whatever, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, and then that's pretty much it, actually. So yeah, that's really my very short personal history.
All right. I guess I'll take this one next because I'm really curious to Shane's experience on this one to close out the personal experience. And mine is, I don't know. I know I played it. I don't know when I got it. That's the real question. For me anyway, probably because when this game came out in 2003, I was smoking a shitload of pot. So if a lot of things get muddled, I have a copy of the Castlevania Double Pack, which is a Game Boy Advance game that has both Harmony of Dissonance and Aria of Sorrow on it. Like when I started building this collection again, like back in 2013, I looked at my Game Boy Advance collection. I'm like, oh, I have no idea what this game is. I had no idea I bought it. I must have just stumbled upon it somewhere in my collecting like phase recently. So in preparation for this episode, because I'd known I had played Aria of Sorrow before, I thought I had the original cart. I thought I played just the game. So in preparation, I threw this thing in my GameCube and loaded it up, and I see a file with like the stupid nickname that my friends gave me back in my college partying days, like before I joined the Navy. I was like, this is not possible. So apparently I had played this game either shortly after launch or like right after I joined the Navy and like completed to 100%, got all the items, everything. And that's why I like have like memories of playing the shit out of it. But I got it on this Castlevania Double Pack, which apparently is a rare thing that I never remembered buying, like ever, and played the crap out of it there. I do remember liking it a lot back then, obviously. I just don't know how, for reasons. Yeah, I mean, it incentivized me to get Dawn of Sorrow for the DS, which I don't remember specifically, but I do remember having fond memories of it and liking it a lot. But a lot of that was because, I was big into Castlevania, big into the Metroidvania formula. And obviously this was a game I was very interested in playing, and I did. And I remember enjoying it thoroughly. But we'll find out if I still do today. So how about yourself, Shane?
Well, so you're going to go and tell that story and mention your super embarrassing nickname and not actually tell us what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. The nickname was Cooler because I don't know why it was that, but the reason why it was Cooler is because after we graduated high school, some of our friends went to Northern Illinois in DeKalb, Illinois. And we would go and we would party there. We weren't 21 yet, so we were going into the dorms to try and get to a dorm party or something like that. And we were trying to sneak beer in. So instead of doing it covertly, I put all the beers into a red cooler. Like I was just, trying to be practical, but wasn't very discreet. So they laughed at me because they thought, how could you be so stupid to think that they wouldn't check the cooler if they're looking for underage drinkers. So that's how I got my nickname.
I mean, I don't know. That feels pretty galaxy brain to me, actually. You're just like, you know what? Like, it's like the just walk into a place with a clipboard kind of a deal where it's like, you just look like you belong and nobody questions anything.
Yeah. Act like you've been there before.
Yeah,
exactly. Apparently it didn't work because we did get caught and all of our beers were tossed.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Gave you the benefit of the doubt, but
yeah, that's how I got the nickname. If it had worked, I wouldn't have gotten it.
Yeah. I suppose that's fair.
You guys were pretty young, so it was probably pretty shitty beer.
I think it was Miller Lite, so yeah.
Okay.
Again, pretty shitty beer.
Yeah, my first guess with is always Keystone. That's like my go-to. Like, that's probably shitty.
Well, that was before a 12-pack cost $14.
Yeah.
That's back when you can get like a 12-pack of Miller Lite for like $5.
The hallmark of quality.
Finally, we're talking about alcohol on Retro Hangover.
Been a minute.
It has. Yeah. Speaking of just like walking into places like you belong, we totally did that on our trip too, where we were just like, we needed a place. We were in between like accommodations and we needed a place to like change our clothes and stuff. And so we just walked into a hotel like we belonged there and asked the desk for a key, and they just gave it to us so we could use the bathroom, because apparently they key their bathrooms so like the public can't use them. But you're just like, oh, we lost our key and like we really need to use the restroom. Is that okay? They're like, yeah, it's fine. So I felt like Hitman.
Very nice.
Anyway, let's see my personal experience. So I also don't recall exactly when I played this game or how I got it, but I do recall playing it, I want to say relatively close to its release window, somewhere around there. And interestingly enough, unlike Chris, and I'm not sure about Keith, but his reaction to my disdain for the first Castlevania makes me think this is probably the case. This game and this trilogy of games, I should say, for the GBA was actually my introduction to Castlevania as a series. So that might also inform you as to maybe why I'm not super fond of the original NES titles and why I think these are way better. But yeah, so this was my introduction to Castlevania. I don't recall if it was Aria specifically that I'd started with or if it was one of the other two. I might have played them out of order, but suffice to say, it was roughly around that like early to mid 2000s time frame when I played them. I did have a GBA. I eventually upgraded to a GBA SP, which I still maintain is like one of the best handhelds ever. That clamshell design is just perfect.
Chef's kiss.
I've heard a lot of people share that sentiment.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the most non-ergonomic shit in the world because it's so small.
Mm-hmm.
So like you have to like crook your wrists inward to get to play it. But you know what? Doesn't matter. It's still fantastic. But anyway, yeah, so that's kind of my personal experience. So this Metroidvania style Castlevania on the GBA was where I began my Castlevania journey. And so I have a lot of fond memories of all three of these games in this particular like trilogy set. But we'll get into the other stuff in a little bit here. But I think comparatively, Aria of Sorrow is my favorite of the three for reasons that I think will become apparent shortly.
Or a child.
What?
Huh?
That log had a child.
Oh, you said a parent, so I said a child.
Going
into the plot, that's terrible. Going into the plot writing here, I like how I just didn't say like the story or the narrative. I'm a robot. This is really AI, everybody.
Yeah.
The story here is that you are where's he from? Is Soma Cruz from like America? I don't know where he's from. But anyway, you are Soma Cruz.
I don't think they actually say where specifically.
Yeah, I don't think they do. But he's on a like field trip, I think.
He's an exchange student.
Yeah, and he's
Yeah.
in Japan.
He's
Yeah,
on a
he's in Japan.
field trip.
Yeah. I don't know. But they go to a shrine in Japan, and it's during an eclipse. And during the eclipse at the shrine, it takes him to Dracula's castle. He has to find Dracula in order to get out of the castle. His entire objective is to get out of the castle. And then he meets mysterious people like Arikado and these other characters, like a character named Jay. His name is Jay. And he's there with his girlfriend who also gets trapped. And he also finds this army dude. And all along the way, he hears a story about a mysterious resurrection of Dracula. And I think everything here is incredibly stupid, but it still works.
And the army dude, by the way, Hammer.
Yeah.
Fucking Hammer. He's also just so out of place. He looks like he belongs in like a Contra game or something.
Yes.
And he just showed up here and he's just like, I don't fucking care about any of this shit, but here, let me sell you some garbage.
His theme song sounds like something out of like Final Fight or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait. There was an actor called Army Hammer that was like a cannibal or some shit, right?
I'm sorry, what?
Am I imagining this? Is this a fever dream?
I've heard the name Army Hammer. I didn't know about the cannibal portion.
Oh, I was just saying if that was the case, like it would fit perfectly in this game. Okay, obscure culture references over, but yeah, this plot's stupid. I love it though.
What? You mean it doesn't make sense the Dracula's castle's inside the eclipse?
Yeah, how does
the
that
files are in the computer.
I thought it was in Eastern Europe. Not anymore.
Yeah, I like how they hand wave that too. He's like, I thought it was in fucking Transylvania or some shit. They're like, nah, it's in the moon. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, sure.
We totally moved it there in 1999. It was a really expensive move, cost Dracula a lot of money. The insurance was ridiculous.
Prince was involved.
But you know what? He's paying less taxes now, and he's very happy about it.
I mean, I don't know, man. Like moon taxes sounds like they'd be expensive.
I mean, Elon doesn't pay any taxes, so I mean, they might not.
I think it's kind of cool that it's like Dracula's castle was banished to an eclipse. Does it make fucking sense? Absolutely not.
No.
But it sounds really cool
It does.
because eventually you find out, I don't remember his first name. Jay is a Belmont.
Julius.
Julius, yes.
Yes.
And he is the one that banished Dracula's castle to the moon. And I want to see that video game.
I do too. Unironically, I really do.
I want to play that Castlevania game where you fucking send Dracula to the moon.
Here's what I want to know. Maybe I missed this. I may have missed this. So here's this like fresh out of the water, like teenager. He has to be, I think, 17, 18 years old. You get thrown into a castle that you've never seen before, and you don't know how to get home. And like the first thing you do when you walk into the door to figure shit out, there's literally zombies, and you're not panicking. You're just like, oh, this is cool. Oh, by the way, I just found this sword. I'm just gonna start like slashing them and shit. This is awesome. Like that's like way out of place for me. Is that what normal people do? Like, oh, zombie, I'm just gonna attack it. Like, is this normal in 2030 or whatever, and when this game takes place?
Haven't you just casually eaten people's souls before, Chris?
I mean, you make a really good point.
I mean, the funny thing is like nobody reacts in the way that
Nobody.
you think that they should.
No.
Here's these terrible monsters. Yeah, cool.
The writing is terrible in this. It's incredibly heavy-handed. I don't know if we're going to talk about the quote-unquote twist. It's not really a twist because they basically tell you what is going to happen in the dialogue before it even happens. It doesn't even hide the fact
No.
who Soma is supposed to be. So
Yeah. Well, they try to make it seem like the other dude is that dude, the guy named Graham
Yeah.
that shows up.
yeah.
Because he's all like, oh, I'm like mysterious and a badass, and I am going to be the all powerful person in this castle, which I guess that kind of gives things away. But he's just like, it's very cheesy. I don't know. I don't want to rip on it because like it serves its function, but it just seems like a means to an end to explore a castle, which I guess technically was what Symphony of the Night was, but at least they had a connection like Dracula X. But this is just, I'll give them kudos for technically taking it out of Eastern Europe and expanding on the universe in a way that was kind of unexpected. Like now you are in Japan, sort of, but not really because you're in a castle. But yeah, that it doesn't mean anything's mutually exclusive to a certain region or area or family line or anything like that. I do appreciate that. But outside of that, it's just like, This is like slapstick Saturday morning cartoon shit.
Yeah, I appreciate, as much as I'm shitting on the story with you guys, I also don't really take stock in a lot of video game stories with that. And also I haven't played a lot of Castlevania games either. I appreciate what they try to do, but at the end of the day, I'm in Dracula's castle. I'm gonna track down Dracula and fucking kill Dracula. That's all I care about.
Yes, sort of.
I honestly don't have too much more to say about the story. I think it is what it is. Like you said, I think it's just a means to an end. I've kind of come to expect it, especially, I feel like, especially with this, not specifically this era of games, but like games from like the NES era up through maybe more recent times when I think story in games ended up mattering a bit more and things became more fleshed out and people were building entire universes around shit or whatever. And some of that was already coming together with this because, you know, there are some ties into other Castlevania games and other events that have occurred and blah, blah, blah. But I don't think the writing quality was quite there yet. And so I know it's totally biased because there are definitely other games we've talked about where I 100% will not give them a pass. But for this one, I kind of just do because it's just there. And honestly, I'm not here for the story. I mean, other than the notion of the castle just being in an eclipse, which is ridiculous. I'm more here for the gameplay, which is maybe what we're going to talk about now.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea, Shane.
Wow. I thought so.
Shane, how about you kick us off with this one since you did such a great job of segueing into the gameplay? What overall did you think of it?
Man, this shit's so good. I mean, okay, so it's definitely not perfect. I will say that. However, having not played this game for, God, I don't know, 20 years now, I guess, 15, 20 years, booting this back up, it was like slipping on a well-fitted glove. It was like tucking yourself into a warm blanket. I was just like, yep, this is what I remember. This is some good old 2D Metroidvania, Castlevania peak gameplay. It feels good. It's like super intuitive. Yeah, man, I enjoyed playing this game over again so much. And I don't often do that because, you know, especially with how fleeting time is, I don't have the time to go back and play other games I've already played, except for a select few, maybe. But yeah, this one, it was just like, I just slipped right back into it. It was very pleasing. Like I said, it's not perfect. There are a few things that on a second playthrough, you know, 2 decades later, maybe a slightly different take on. I don't want to monopolize the whole conversation right off the get here, but suffice to say, maybe throw some seeds for some discussion in there, maybe that, you know, perhaps we didn't need as many choices in weapons and secondary weapons and monsters' souls because it was cool, but maybe a little bit bloated because you just find a set that you like and you kind of stick with it. At least that's what I did.
How dare you make sense? Keith, I'll let you expound on it next.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of echo what Shane said in that I was surprised at how modern this felt. It really does feel very good to play.
Yeah.
And that backslide that Soma does, real nice. I like it.
Loves that backslide.
And yeah, as far as the soul system, and I mean, I don't know if you want me to really break that down, but
yeah, go for it.
So you basically have 4, I guess you would call them abilities, right? So you have souls that you can collect that basically act as like a sub weapon. So like if you think of the original Castlevanias, you would have like, why do I want to say boomerang? You would have your cross. It's all the Australia talk.
You're Nintendo censoring yourself is what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So you'd have like your cross or your holy water. Then you would have your main weapon, which would be the whip. So that kind of works that way here. You also have these souls that could be like defensive abilities as well. And then you have other souls that are like for traversal, basically. So like ones that allow you to, walk on water or float around or whatever. And then lastly, you have the souls that you pick up from bosses, which are essentially your basic Metroidvania stuff that you would get now in like every single game, like a double jump or like a slide or something like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those mandatory items that let you into the next section.
Exactly. Yeah.
Traversal style stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think what Shane was talking about mostly were the sub weapon style souls, in which there are 110 to collect, if I'm remembering right. It's a lot.
Oh, I don't know how many there were. I didn't care. Like I think Shane said it best. Like you find the ones you like and you stick with them.
Yes, exactly. So for my first playthrough last year, I don't think I really touched any of that at all. And then for this playthrough, I experimented a little bit, but it wasn't a lot.
Mhm.
It really is just kind of bloated and unnecessary. I appreciate it's there, and I think it really opens up the gameplay. I couldn't find any power-ups or souls that were useless. I feel like they all have a use in some cases, but it's choice paralysis, essentially.
Yeah. And the thing is, and I was thinking about this more leading up to us discussing this today, and I feel like there's this thing that's kind of endemic with a lot of video games where people are always talking about more. I want there to be more in this in my game. I want more choice. I want more weapons. I want more skills, blah 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 blah. And I don't think more is necessarily always better. I mean, it's sort of the same argument when you talk about open world games like we were discussing, on the opening of the show. It's like bigger is not necessarily better. I think there's a lot to be said for a good focused experience. And the interesting thing with Aria of Sorrow is that I feel like it's weirdly on both ends of that spectrum, depending on what you're talking about. So if you're talking about the soul system and the sub weapons and even the main weapons themselves, I think that's way on one side where it's too much. And I think it could have used a streamlining pass where honestly, I would venture even so far as to say that maybe I would have preferred they go a slightly more Mega Man-esque route where like there's only, let's say, 5 or 10 sub weapons period, but they all have like very clear specific advantages depending on what situation you happen to be in at any given time. I feel like mechanically that would have felt better than just having 110 random fucking things that you don't know necessarily what they do, and unless you have a whole bunch of time on your hands, you're probably not going to experiment with all of them. So once you land on one that you're like, yeah, this seems good, you just kind of stick with it for the whole game, which is what I did. Like it was one of the spear ones. And like, as soon as I found that one that just throws the spear straight, not the arcing one that you get early on, but the later one where it's just like a straight shot across the screen, I just used that all the time for everything for my sub weapon. And I never swapped it out again because it was effective. But I feel like that would have been a good change on that end. And same goes for the main weapons. Like I will say I did enjoy finding like the more like unique, like named swords and stuff. That was kind of cool. It's just neat to find those. But honestly, I didn't, the majority of the weapons I didn't even use. I found, What was it called? Like Ascalon, I think was the one that I was using for most of the game, where it's just big fucking chonky sword that does an arc and does a fuck ton of damage.
Yeah. I think that's the one I used too.
Yeah. Like as soon as I found that, I was just like, okay, yeah. I mean, this other like unique named sword also apparently does poison damage, but like it's like half of the listed DPS is the other one. So why would I bother?
Exactly.
And there didn't seem to be reasons to swap really.
And I think the sword that we used also adds to your strength stat also.
Yeah.
And there's a sword at the end that's like super broken too. That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the arc attack pattern is, in my opinion, it's the best one anyway, but just because you get more coverage. So that's that like one side of that spectrum, right? Where it's like, maybe this was too much. We probably could have cut down on this. But then the game is also on the other side when it comes to its map, its overall environment. And this was one of the complaints that honestly I had with Symphony of the Night, in that I think there was too much. I think they were trying to be too ambitious and there was too much to explore and the game drags. This game doesn't do that.
No.
Like, you can finish Aria of Sorrow if you're not going to 100% everything, probably 8 to 10 hours, give or take. That is a nice compact experience. And that's actually just the right amount of time that I would want to put into something like this, where it's like I was able to explore more or less the entire castle, do everything I felt like I wanted to do, and get a satisfying conclusion all within like 8 to 10 hours. Like, that's a good package right there. And like, that was also a change from even the earlier games, in that they were trying to be like, Symphony was trying to be super ambitious. And then I think they tried to scale that back. And then with the first two, it was still like, oh, maybe big map is better. And then Aria of Sorrow, I feel like they really kind of like sat down and looked at this and was like, you know what? Let's cut that down a little bit and let's make the castle itself smaller, but let's get more mileage out of what is there, and then focus more on other things, which we're going to get to after this, like the, visual presentation and the sound and like all that stuff. And I think more time was spent on making a smaller amount of stuff better quality, which in my opinion, not all the time, but I think in most cases is a preferable route, at least for me. I would rather have like a more succinct, high quality experience than just being thrown into a giant thing and being like, I don't know, there's like a fucking 100 enemy camps out there, just go find them.
So my take on this, I'm going to actually start off by somewhat disagreeing with your position on the souls acquisition, right? Yes. Is there a lot? Is there 110? Is that a lot? Absolutely. But the way I think that they implement it, like, you're going to start out and you're going to get some weak ones that you're never going to return to.
Yeah.
And it's not like collecting additional souls makes them stronger or anything. I actually think that's a missed opportunity in a sense, but that would probably lead more into the bloat argument. So as you pick them up, like, there are different play styles that you're going to like. Now, is there an overpowered one? I think it's like, I think it's the Valkyrie that has a sword that comes up and does a ton of damage, right? Once you find that, I mean, it's pretty much over. But the drop rate's really low, which actually is kind of a complaint of mine for trying to get into some areas that you might, or even the end of the game, the real ending is the drop rate for souls can be atrociously low. And so you're going to have to farm them for hours, which can suck. But the fact that, like, just because the game itself has a real natural flow to it in terms of where you're going in the castle, when I mean, and that aspect, I 100% agree with you, Shane, too, because I never felt lost. I always knew where to go. In fact, sometimes I was like, am I here too early? And I wasn't. Like, when you fight death, like, that felt way too early for a Castlevania game, but I was there on time and I got there without having to look up a guide or anything. In fact, up until the end of the game, I don't feel like a guide is necessary at all for this game in an era where like guides were the thing.
Yeah.
So really breezy experience for the most part. But those souls, like, yeah, it encourages you to experiment. And the further you get in the game, the more powerful the souls get. So yes, you have a lot. You're like, yeah, well, I really like the soul at the beginning of the game, but you're not meant to use that anymore. You're meant to use those souls that you find later on. And you experiment more. Like, you like the spear. I like the Dryad one, where you can toss this like seed on an enemy and you get 8 points per second back for regenerating health. That way you don't have to spend any money on, items or anything like that to heal yourself.
Potions, yeah.
And you can only buy 9 at a time for those, which you don't really need, because if you have the right soul loadout too, I mean, bosses are extremely easy. I think I only struggled with Julius, which I had a real hard time with for some reason. Now, in terms of the equipment, I 100% agree with you. There's too much fucking equipment. Way too much. I don't need like 15 different swords. In fact, by the time you can get back to Mr. Hammer, like, there's a sword that you can get all the way at the bottom and you can easily afford it. And there's no reason to even try out the ones that are cheaper or less powerful.
Nope.
The spears, they suck, I think. Like, the swords in general are the best. Like, your cestus punches, your just punch attacks. There's no reason to use them because they're not faster than your sword or noticeably faster. So in terms of equipment, there's like no real reason to experiment with all these different weapons. And even when they are cool, but like almost instantaneously, there's a sword that will replace another sword. Like, there's this whip sword that you get that increases your distance if you don't have a real good weapon to get there and doesn't cost any MP. Awesome. guess what? There's no replacement for that later in the game. So you're essentially only using that for like this limited portion, and there's no use to going to it back because you don't see any real weapons do anything cool like that. So yeah, the equipment itself, really limited. I have a problem with that. Souls, I don't, because I think it's a gradual curve of what you're collecting and what you can experiment with, even though I think, they're not all created equal, obviously. Just transversing the map, utterly fantastic. Bosses, kind of boring, maybe a little easy, not very creative, if I could be honest, but the exploration more than made up for it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually liked the boss encounters. I think the multi-sprite giant bosses were definitely cool. I think Aria of Sorrow just in general is an easier game.
I think so.
Than the first two for the GBA, or even compared to a lot of other 2D Castlevanias, I think. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because kind of like the way you put it, it is a little bit of like it's a cover girl experience. It's easy and it's breezy, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. It doesn't need to be Order of Ecclesia all the fucking time, because that game is hard as fucking balls. But with all of that being said, though, like we haven't even touched on the other equipment. Like we've been talking exclusively about weapons and things like that, but then you've also got armor and what the fuck was the other one? Armor and something. Oh, accessories, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm totally for that as the loot whore that I am playing Diablo and other ARPGs. Totally like me some loot. But again, I felt like this sort of suffered from the same problems in that maybe there was, I don't want to say too much, because it didn't actually feel like there was an overabundance of these other equipment pieces necessarily. It was just that there was some like variation in the bonuses that they give you that I kind of felt were mostly superfluous. It was just like, I don't know about how you guys played it, but I 100% just always picked like whatever gave me the most defense. And if it gave me a strength bonus, then awesome, because more damage is good. That was it. Like there were other pieces of armor that was like, oh, this is like, it's like a tunic. So like it doesn't give you as much defense, but like you have more agility. And I'm like, what the fuck is that going to do for me? I don't care. Like just give me more defense so I can get hit more, and give me more so I can do damage. That's all I cared about. So I don't know if if those stat bonuses are actually are effective, or like, was I missing out on an opportunity there? I don't know.
I tend to agree. I mean, you find your play style, what do you like doing the most? And I found like just putting everything into defense was the most effective strategy.
Yeah.
Because eventually you're going to find a better sword. I think there's some souls that like give you more strength or something. It's not that it was too much. It was just too much shit. Like there was maybe one or two items that you would probably use, and the rest of them like, why would I ever use this? This is worthless.
Maybe it's not that it's too much. Maybe it felt kind of like half baked, in that like if you were going to go like whole hog into like the RPG territory, then make it so that if I pick a piece of armor that gives me like, an intelligence bonus or something, like I'm building towards like, a magic build or something where like, oh, I'm going to be able to use soul abilities way more often because I built towards being able to do that or something. And I don't think that's really the case here. Like I kind of felt like the changes were mostly negligible. It was kind of like this is neat, but also I would have been totally fine with just a linear progression of just like, oh, you found the next piece of armor. It's like unequivocally better than the one you had before.
Yeah, strength and defense were the only ones that really seemed to make a difference.
Yeah.
That were noticeable anyway. Everything else I didn't really seem to appreciate. Did you notice anything like that, Keith?
As far as armor and weapons go, I mean, yeah, I basically just raised as soon as I found something stronger, I just put that on.
Mm-hmm.
Now accessories, and I think, Chris, one of your gripes was the drop rate with the souls.
Yes.
Very early on, you get an accessory that raises your luck stat.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that is directly tied to the drop rate of the souls. And I did not take that thing off for the entirety of the game. And I know it kind of goes against what I talked about when I was like, well, this game has too many souls. But it does have that dopamine hit when you pop that cherry and that soul flies right into your chest.
It does.
And I was getting them pretty often. I didn't get all of them. And I know I didn't get, you have to get 3 specific souls to get the true ending to this game, and I certainly did not do that. I didn't do that the first time I played this game. I didn't do it when I played it for the show. So yeah, that's something that I never really changed. I forgot what your original question was, but that was just on my mind.
Okay. I mean,
It's
you
like,
pretty much
I don't know
answered.
what you were talking about, but I wanted to talk about my thing. So,
Well, you made some valid points, but I'll go back to the Soul Collection there. And it was one specific monster. It was called a Curly. And I did equip that item, which is a +8 luck item. I know which one you're talking about. And I did equip a soul that increased my luck too. So not only had an accessory, but I also had the soul equipped. And I didn't have enough money that I farmed in order to buy the item that you can get. There's a way to do it because it's on my old save file. I don't know how I got it, but you can buy an item that allows you to increase the rate of souls on top of that.
yeah, didn't that one cost like 300,000 gold or something like that? I
Yes.
think?
Yeah. It cost, and it took me less time to get that my original one than I played on this file for some reason. I have no idea how I did it. I spent 45 minutes to an hour killing Curlies until I got that soul. And the reason you need that soul is because there's a part that you need to put on the walk on water soul, and it'll take you through. There's this piece of armor behind a gate. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? There's an area called the Forbidden Area.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there's three souls that can get you there. Curly, Manticore, and something else. The other two, the Manticore and whatever the other one is, they don't have a high spawn rate area where you can just kill them. And they don't drop very often anyway, because I didn't get either of those souls. So I spent 45 minutes killing this fucking Curly over and over and over and over and over and over again. I didn't get any fucking drop. But the 3 souls I needed to get the end game, first run, no issues. So the RNG on these drop rates for these souls can be fucking infuriating. There's no two experiences. Some people will tell you they have no issues like you just did. And I guess the first time I played it, I had 0 issues. I've talked to other people. Shane, I don't know if you had any issues, but sometimes if you're looking for a specific soul, you're not going to get it unless if the game doesn't want you to get it. It's almost worse in a sense than Symphony of the Night, how they pulled their true ending, because at least these are items that you can obtain. On Aria of Sorrow, again, the souls that I need to get the true ending, I had no issues. So maybe they're a high drop rate. But if it's RNG and you don't get it, you may not be able to see the true ending just because the game doesn't want to give you it. Or you might not be able to access an area because the game doesn't want to give you it.
I wonder mechanically how it works. Do each individual enemy have their own drop rate? It would almost have to be, I think.
I would have to assume so. They have the certain odds, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't personally have much of an issue with the drop rates, but that's also because I really wasn't paying attention to it, frankly.
Right.
I was just like, oh, it happened. That's cool. I got a thing. I didn't care too much about it.
Yeah, kind of same. I wasn't well, then again, I was also, I don't know if this is how you guys play, but whenever I play an RPG, and this has got some light RPG elements to it, I never back down from a fight. I fucking kill everything I see. So
same.
Mhm.
Yes.
I also benefited from doing that, just getting super fucking strong too, leveling up. So yeah, that's probably why I ended up with so many souls. I mean, it just comes down to RNG, I guess, but also
Yeah.
to what Shane was saying. I also to some extent wasn't paying attention because I was set up the way I wanted to be set up.
Yeah. Well, to that point, I wasn't paying attention either until I was like, how do I get in this area? For the majority of the game, I did not care. It has a really good flow to it. Like I said, getting the souls that you need or the souls that you want, there's a decent enough variety, even if you're not grinding or farming for souls, that you're going to get something you like. But it comes down to the time that sometimes you're going to need something to get somewhere, and maybe you're lucky and you get it, or maybe you're not. And that kind of sucks. It's not a deal breaker. It's just
Sure.
When you notice it, you can notice it.
Yeah. Speaking of the leveling system, because that's been mentioned a few times now, that was another one. And I don't know. I don't know. Maybe this is a controversial take. I'm not sure, especially as someone who generally likes RPGs and that sort of a thing. But I almost felt like it was not necessary at all. I feel like this game could have gone without the RPG style leveling and stat upgrade system like that, and would have been no different. It felt like it was just there for the sake of being there, and it wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference if it wasn't, because I feel like the majority of, or it could not as it exists currently, but if they had changed it so that a leveling mechanic was not in this game, I feel like they could have just as easily based all of your character power just on the gear upgrades that you find. and it probably would have still been fine. Like there was no point. Like there are other games like I don't want to sound elitist, but like true RPGs where leveling is like an important thing, where I'm just like, I was like, fuck yeah, I just hit level 20 or whatever. There was not a single time in this game where I was just like, oh, thank God I just leveled. It was just like oh, I leveled. Huh. Anyway. And like, that was it, I don't know. Like it's neat, but I didn't feel like it was necessary. And I know that's kind of nitpicky, but
I liked it. I disagree with you, but I understand what you're saying because the leveling itself is very gradual. You do not see increases, like immediate differences in level increases.
Right.
You might see maybe 1 more damage or 2 more damage. Where I really actually noticed that it made a difference was at the very end of the game, right before the true final boss. There's a save room, and then you go out there and there's this big armored monster that gives you like 3,000 experience points per kill. And I like sat there and I farmed that guy for like a good 15 minutes until I gained like 5 levels, 6 levels, something like that. I noticed every single level I gained, I did like 2 more damage, 3 more damage, every single level. I did realize, there's a cumulative difference. And it's also nice to see that level up. It gives that nice little dopamine hit, just like a soul.
Yeah.
And you get more hit points. So if you are having difficulty with the boss, it does make a slight difference. Now, souls can make up for that. You don't necessarily need it. Or there could be a different mechanic they could have done other than leveling up, like maybe how many souls you've collected, which there is. I think there is a soul that does that, but I don't think it does it very well. But leaned more into that.
Oh, no, actually, I know what you're talking about. That's the headhunter.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I used that like as soon as I got it, and I never took it off except for when I needed like the traversal specific souls. It actually makes a pretty big difference. Like if you invest in it and keep it on like right from the get, it actually does give you a pretty significant stat boost.
Okay. Yeah. But if they did more with that, I think that would have been like more unique and more interesting than a leveling system. But I think what they have, it does achieve things. But the thing is that you don't get that immediate return on that investment. You don't get that immediate sense of gratification. It's more like after you've gained 5 levels, you'd be like, oh, okay, I noticed that there's a difference. But the way the game scales and the way that the game funnels you through and progresses you, it's harder to notice that, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
Keith, what you got?
I'm just going to agree with Chris. I kind of side with him more on that the game kind of needs that leveling, because some of these bosses, I mean, as easy as they are, they do hit very fucking hard if you are under leveled.
Yes.
And I think like when you talk about modern Metroidvanias, a lot of them don't have those leveling mechanics. Like a lot of your character progression is guided through MacGuffins. So you might collect something from a boss that increases your life bar, or you might have some sort of currency that you collect throughout the environment that increase your stats. I think this is just a very old school way of doing what modern Metroidvanias do now, and just kind of take the numbers out and instead make it like environmental things that help your character progress.
Yeah. And maybe that's what it is, just coming at it from maybe that like slightly more, I guess, modern sensibility at this point. It's just because like, again, I'm always there for like the dopamine level ups. Like I love that shit, but I guess maybe just having experience with other games like Guacamelee or something like that, for example, that does that, where it's your character progression is very measured in that like you do gain those boosts from these sort of like checkpoint events throughout the game, much in the same way that like a typical Zelda game kind of plays out, where you beat a boss. Now you have a heart container that gives you 1 extra heart so you can take more damage. Very similar to that. And I actually, in a way, I feel like personally, I think I actually prefer that methodology a little bit more, because this approach can, and this sort of goes with what Chris was saying earlier, is that it almost like encourages you like down the path of a more like grindy experience, where it's like, oh, well, if you feel like you're having trouble, like go kill, 1,000 fishmen or whatever, and then come back and try it again. Whereas the other approach, there's no option for that. So it's like, you've gotten upgrades that the game expects you to have at this point. So if you're failing, like, that's fucking on you. So get better. So I don't know. Ultimately, I think it comes down to personal preference. I don't mind it. It's just something I notice. That I think that's what it is. And I think that's a blanket statement for like most of what we've talked about for this gameplay section, is that I don't actually have an issue really with like any of this.
No.
It's just, if I'm going to find things to criticize that maybe could have been done better with, you know, of course, whatever 20 years of game development, you know, since this came out, these are the things that I feel like I might want to have changed. And on that note, the soul sets, I like that idea of having those 3 slots and they each have sort of their own distinct purpose. I think that's cool. The one like nitpicky thing that I had with that is that it encourages a lot of menuing.
Yes.
That I don't like.
Yes.
Yeah, way too much time in menus. I agree. 100%.
Yes.
I wish there was like a quick switch button for like
yes.
one of the, I think the ability soul or whatever you want to call it.
Right. Yeah, that one specifically. And honestly, I actually wish that was not a soul at all. Like those things, like the ability to walk on water or the ability to walk underwater, or the one that gives you the wings so that you can float when you jump. Like those should not have been souls that you have to equip and unequip. Like those should have just been default abilities that you just gained, much in the same way that you get like
the double jump,
the slide or the double jump. Yeah. Like those should have been part of that list, because having to go into the menu and then swap it out so I can walk on water for 5 seconds to get to a place, then swap it back to the other one that I actually want to use. Like it's just tedious, you know?
Especially when you have to continuously traverse these areas and keep going back and forth.
Yeah.
Like get certain items or do certain events, because there's times when you're swapping through menus in certain parts of the castle. Just like, this is ridiculous. Could have been better designed. And
granted, like the GBA has a pretty limited button selection, right? So
right.
There's only so much you could do, but I still think that you could have leveraged like button combos or something to like hotkey these things. So it's just like, oh, you want to, you know, whatever, you want to do the walking on water thing. Well, now that you've got that, like hit this button combo and you can do it or something. But again, at the end of the day, kind of nitpicky, but it was definitely something I noticed. And clearly it's something that aggravated both of you as well. So
it needs to be called out.
Yeah,
it does. But overall, I think we've nailed this gameplay down pretty good. We spent a lot of times just pointing out the criticisms that I think are extremely valid, but I think we all are very positive on the gameplay as a whole.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're gonna call out what needs to be called out. You're not getting off scot-free, Aria of Sorrow. We're not gonna just sit here and suck your dick all day. We know you have flaws. We know you have a wart there that's gross and has pus, but we're not gonna talk about that because that looks gross. But speaking about how things look, I mean, this game has graphics.
Sure does.
And it does not. They do not ooze pus.
Well, some of them.
Yeah.
Oh, some of them. Well, yeah, they're supposed to, though.
True.
And I think this game looks great. I think this game looks spectacular. I played on a Game Boy player first, and I can tell you, like on a TV, but this is just all GBA games through the GameCube. It kind of looked fuzzy, and it doesn't look that great. But as soon as you put that thing on, like on a DS Lite, holy shit. It looks spectacular. The animation frames looks better than Symphony of the Night. I think it's a better looking game than Symphony of the Night overall anyway.
I would agree.
The sprites are very detailed. Everything is smooth. I didn't notice any slowdown that I can recall. Like even when there's a lot going on the screen, I might be wrong on that. There may have been 1 or 2, but it wasn't enough to stick in my mind. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous game that makes very good use of the GBA screen, which is usually a criticism for action platformers. I never felt too cramped, never felt like there's too much going on, overcomplicated. It's amazing, I think.
Keith, do you want to jump in before I steal all your thunder?
Yeah, so I have a problem with the way this game, well, not the way the game looks like graphically. Like I agree with everything you say, Chris. Like on a base level, yes, this game looks great. Also, kudos to Konami. Lord knows they need it. Because it is a great conversion on that Konami collection. This game looks great on a 70-inch UHD TV. I'm sure it looks a lot better in handheld, but still awesome conversion. Now, the issue that I have with it, and is probably a very personal issue, is everything is fucking generic. Everything looks just like your generic Castlevania, like fantasy, medieval fantasy type of art direction. And, we talk about this game taking place in, this game was made in probably developed in 2002, came out 2003. I give them a little bit of credit. I know, in 2035, things are still going to look how they look. They're just going to be different a little bit. We're not going to have laser beams flying out of our houses for some reason, or flying cars, and we're going to be the fucking Jetsons living in outer space or whatever. But they could have done something future. You are essentially going to the moon to fight Dracula. They could have made Dracula's castle a more interesting setting with more interesting monsters. Now, the monster design, yeah, some of them are pretty cool. This is probably the dumbest looking version of Death I've ever seen. It's just
I agree.
in this fucking giant purple robe, and that's about it.
But they did something different, Keith.
Did they though? It's just I think about those original Castlevania games, because those are just kind of that's my base knowledge of Castlevania. I really love those original three. Not so much Simon's Quest, but I appreciate Simon's Quest. That's my base knowledge, is those first three games, and they have that nice horror aesthetic. And I see that once Symphony of the Night came around, I, again, never played it, but I have seen it. They dive into that more medieval fantasy realm, and that's just kind of what Circle of the Moon was. Harmony of Dissonance now has a very interesting version of Dracula's castle. It looks in some areas, it looks like there's brains crawling out of the walls. They're doing some fucking really interesting art direction in Harmony of Dissonance. And then you play this game and it's just generic castle. So I don't know how you feel, Shane, but that's my very hot take on this game. Does it look great? Yes. But man, is it fucking generic.
No, I think I could see what you're saying with that. I think from an art direction perspective, yeah, I think it is pretty run of the mill. I mean, I feel like the issue, the thing specifically that you brought up about it being in the future, I feel like they were kind of, if I had to guess, I feel like they were kind of constrained by the fact
the
that
timeline and the lore.
Well, kind of, but the fact that yes, it is 2035, and yes, you're in the fucking moon, but also it's still just Dracula's regular ass castle that's up there, right? So it's a 18th century or whatever, 15th, however fucking old he is, castle, but it's just on the moon. So I don't know what they could have done that wouldn't have seemed wildly out of place. Having weird tech stuff or something in there probably wouldn't have made too much sense. So I kind of get where they're coming from. And I feel like creatively, they were probably a little constrained by that of
Shane.
Well, it's really neat that we're in an eclipse, but also we're still in this old ass castle. So what are we going to do with
Shane,
that?
They could have had skeletons on motorcycles.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah.
I don't even, what am I even saying? Of course. Yeah. You could have had space zombies.
Exactly. Yes. It's just you walk in and the first enemy you see is just here's your zombies. And it's all right, here's a skeleton. All right, here's your Frankenstein. Here's a werewolf. And it's why aren't these more fucked up? Why aren't they mutated? Why aren't the zombies also half fucking, I don't know, dog, and there's no gravity on the moon, so why aren't they jumping and crawling on the walls and stuff? I don't know. Maybe I'm asking too much. This is a GBA game.
I think that's fair.
No, I mean, no, you know what? No, fuck it. Throw out everything I said, because motorcycle skeletons, that negates everything that I previously said.
And they have laser guns.
And that was in 1895 or something.
Yeah. Yeah. They were innovating far before this game came out. So there's no excuse. That's what we've got. That's what we've concluded. But yeah, no, I mean, as far as my feelings on it, direction of it aside, I really enjoyed the graphical presentation. I thought that this was, again, I think in many ways, this was sort of a culmination of everything that the team had learned from their past efforts. And I feel like they did a lot of refining, and this was the result. And it really does show. I think a lot of the sprite work is just fantastic. Like I said, those big multi-sprite bosses are always impressive. And also, you know, we pointed this out in the brief history, but it's for a good reason. And that is that, like, the animation is just so good. It's so smooth. And it's, and it's something like you can see it anywhere really, but it really stands out just in Soma themselves. Like, if you look at that walk cycle that Soma has, it's perfect. Like, it's so smooth, especially compared to the previous two.
That's also a complaint I have, actually, now that you brought it up.
Really? About the animations?
What you got?
His walk animation is so fucking weird to me. Like, it looks like he's moving in slow motion.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But he's not moving. Like, his legs don't move at the same speed he's actually moving. It is, once I noticed it, I could not stop noticing it.
I will give you that. It's a little reverse moonwalky. I will give you that. Yeah.
That's because he's on the moon, Keith.
Yeah.
It's either they're trying something
what
new.
What the fuck? He's on the moon. What are you saying?
Okay, fair point. I'll give you that one.
That's the one time they were like, hey, this is on the moon. The rest of it, nah.
The other thing, too, with his animation is his keyframes when he uses his weapons are almost exactly the same no matter what fucking weapon he uses. And I know we use that big ass sword, and it just looks so fucking stupid when that fucking sword just swings. I don't need, like, it's a third arm. Like he's waving somebody down. Like he's trying to hail a cab with this fucking sword. And it just looks so stupid.
That's true. You're right.
Yeah, I don't know. Some of his keyframes are like really fucking weird. And like once I noticed it, it was just something that I could not stop noticing.
You don't think that was due to the moon gravity?
Possibly. I mean, would you be able to swing a sword that big if you were on Earth? Probably not.
Probably not. Probably not.
That's a good point.
Does Final Fantasy VII take place on the moon?
Ooh.
It might. Or at least a planet much smaller than Earth.
There you go. Anyway.
Now we're asking the real questions.
We're figuring shit out.
Now that I'm through ranting, that might be the last of my rants for the graphics.
Okay. No, I mean, I think that's totally fair. I don't necessarily have that same viewpoint, but I can see where you're coming from for sure. I just think the overall quality, though, I think is really good. I think one of the other important things, and this is more of like a comparative analysis, I guess, than anything, but like if you look at this game versus the previous entries on the GBA, I want to say Harmony of Dissonance specifically, but don't quote me on that because it's been a minute. But I know one of them, the art style leans way more towards like all of the character sprites have this like weird black outline.
That's Harmony.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not a fan of that. Like, I'm sure it's there because of like visibility on a small screen or whatever, but like did not like that art direction whatsoever. And this thankfully throws that out where everything looks a lot more natural. It looks less video gamey and more like it actually belongs in the environment that it's in. And plus just the overall detail is much higher in the sprite work in this one than I think in the previous ones as well.
That might actually, and I don't know, I'd have to look this up, but that might lean into what Keith's criticism is in looking generic, because as we know, maybe not know, but as it's been said, is Castlevania Circle of the Moon was too dark.
Right.
When it came out on the GBA because no backlit screen. It was a big complaint. So then you get Harmony of Dissonance, which was an overreaction to that criticism. That's why you have the black outline and everything just kind of pops and looks a little weird. This seems to be a happy compromise. And that might be why it's generic, is people still had GBAs that didn't have backlights to them. So you still needed to make a game that was easily visible in an area, you know, with a screen that wasn't backlit. But at the same time, like this was the time that the GBA SP was out. So you could kind of make a game that was benefiting from a backlight and you got rid of those black lines. So that could be the reason that things are more generic, just because they want to use a brighter color palette that's not as dark. So that might lead to just environments themselves just looking less unique and less special, just because it would help out with how it's coming out on the Game Boy Advance, because they're learning a lot going from the regular Game Boy Advance to the SP, but they still had to deal with that original design that was probably hampering it.
Well, that and yeah, and it, in some ways, maybe it's a little unfair to even do the comparison between them anyway, because I mean, as we've said a couple of times, like this was released much later in the system's life cycle. So much like any other game that gets released towards the tail end of a system's lifespan, it's generally going to take advantage of the hardware in ways that, you know, previous releases couldn't or just did not know how to. And so I think this benefits from that as well.
I would agree with that. I think we all agree that the game looks good. I know Keith thinks it's like a saltine cracker Castlevania, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Keith is saying it needs to be a lighter saltine cracker. It has too much gravity too and moves weird. But I think we're all in agreement that it is sufficiently good. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it does look great.
Fair enough. So we will move on now to this game's presentation in the audio department. I kicked off the graphics here. What do you have to say about the sound in this game, Keith?
It's okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it's like there's nothing wrong with it. In the brief history, Shane brought up how maligned Harmony of Dissonance was for its soundtrack, and it is certainly awful. It is really bad. But, you know, it still kind of sounds weird because of that GBA, the sound chip that was in the GBA. And so by default, it just kind of sounds a little rough. But overall, I think it was okay. I feel like they don't change up the music enough, in my opinion. But other than that, I really didn't have a problem with it.
I actually think that the composition is really, really good. I like the way it's directed because I just think it sounds really good, but it sounds like they played all the music while holding it underneath a pillow and were suffocating the Game Boy. That's how I think it sounds. Like, no matter how good you make this music, it is severely hampered by that sound chip, which just sounds muffled and muted. I don't know. It does a great disservice to what was composed for it, because I've heard the remixes and they sound fantastic when like you put like real instruments to it. But it's just like, oh, it just shits all over what could have been great. Shane, I saw you react there too. What, are you on the same level?
Yeah. I really, I mean, I'm super biased anyway, because I mean, listen, like this kind of shit is my jam, right? It's like, oh, what's that? You want a pipe organ with like a choir and maybe some like electric guitar in the background somewhere, some shit, like sign me the fuck up. Yeah, I'm always down for a good Castlevania soundtrack, and I think a lot of this OST is great, actually. I really like it. But yeah, it's 100% just held down by the system that it's on. I mean, there's only so much you can get out of those tiny little tinny speakers on a GBA. So it is unfortunate, and I think it is a little bit of a disservice, but you know, like you said, at least we got remixes.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it'll do that a little bit more justice. I was thinking about the comment that was just made about like the lack of distinction between the different tracks for the different areas. And it's interesting because that's not something that I had considered while playing. Like, it wasn't something that stood out to me necessarily, but now that I think about it, I actually kind of tend to agree. One of the things that a lot of Castlevania games have going for it is that once you traverse into what is clearly like a new distinct area of the castle, it usually has a very different ambiance and like a backing track to go with that. And this game certainly does that, but I can totally see in some cases where things start to sound a little samey. Not bad, but maybe a little too similar.
I'm going to say Hammer's theme is bad.
Yeah, I don't like that one. It's so fucking out of place. And
yeah, it does not belong in this game. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I don't know either. Like I said, I think it fits his character, because seriously, he's just like, what?
It does.
I don't know why the fuck I'm here, but I am.
You want to buy some weapons?
So yeah, you want some armor? I guess. I don't know. How do I get out of here?
Where's he getting that shit from too? Like, who's his supplier?
Dude, I don't know. Graham.
Like, yeah, I just found this big ass sword. You want to buy it? Where'd you get that from? Why the fuck you asking questions?
Yeah, exactly.
He found it in Dracula's castle, claimed it as his own, and took advantage of the situation.
Yeah.
So it's like, wait, you're so powerful, you can just buy like unlimited amounts of this shit. You're not going to go kill Dracula. Hey man, I got kids to feed. I have never heard you talk about any kids. Shut your fucking mouth by the sword.
Well, we're also not questioning why Dracula hides money inside of his sconces either. So
It's like the most deadliest game. It's like he wants them to come and
He
challenge him.
doesn't believe in traditional financial banking institutions. That's what it
the
is.
final Castlevania game should just reveal that all the Castlevanias have been game shows.
Like Running Man. There you go.
Oh my God. I thought you were going to go in a different direction with that, where you're just gonna be like, yeah, it's actually revealed that Dracula is just a really weird doomsday prepper, and he just sticks a bunch of shit in odd places in his castle.
I'm thinking about this in my head. I want to get it out of my head.
How do I unhear something?
Come on down to Dracula's castle. I got all sorts of freeze-dried food over here.
That's right.
We've been freezing corpses for years. I would be getting blood, but I might have company. You know, the end of the world might happen. I need some friends, especially ones that I need to feed on.
Vlad Tepish's military surplus.
That's where Hammer's getting his shit.
Down on Route 101 past the Costco.
I want to save your life.
I want to suck your blood, not your wallet. Oh my God. This is how you know we've run out of things to talk about, like constructively.
All right. Speaking of that, I think it's time to draw this episode to a close and say whether or not this game has held up today.
Speaking of drawing blood.
So we'll let our guests get the final word and take this one out with their recommendation. But Shane, start out with you and let's hear it. Do you think this game holds up today?
Yeah, man. Absolutely. I mean, like we said, I think this is one of those cases where I don't think anything that we've pointed out is a deal breaker. They're all kind of nitpicky and nice to haves, and maybe some things that, like I said, with like 2 decades of experience and evolution in the games industry, we're looking at it now of like, man, this quality of life stuff would be really nice. But at the end of the day, as I said in the beginning, this is still a very playable game. You can get right into it. It's very intuitive, and it does not overstay its welcome, which is something as I get older, it starts to rank far higher on my checklist of things for games of, can I finish this in a reasonable amount of time? And you 100% can do that with Aria of Sorrow. It's only going to ask like maybe, like I said, 8 to maybe 10 hours worth of your time to get the whole experience. There's a reason that, despite some of the flaws that I think we've pointed out, that it sits on top of many people's Castlevania lists, even when compared to the likes of Symphony of the Night or something like that, or the originals. And that's because it is a very solid Metroidvania style game. It took a lot of lessons from Circle of the Moon and Harmony of Dissonance and Symphony itself, I think improved upon a lot of those things. And this was the end result. And no, it's not perfect, but it is a fine gaming experience. And it's one of the few that I would go back and replay again. Because it's enjoyable. So yeah, 100%, definitely worth your time.
I'm going to echo a lot of that. Look, I'd rather play this game over Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. I think it's a more competently made game. I think it goes down really easy. It's a rather breezy experience in and of itself. It's not overly difficult without being a complete pushover. It pretty much gives anyone who wants a casual gaming experience to enjoy while still pleasing a lot of those. It accomplishes the mission of getting after those hardcore game players as well. Look, I can't confidently say that this is the best, Egovania or Metroidvania of all time, but I think that those arguments could have some merit to them, like quite a bit of merit. It's just, it hits a lot of those sweet spots. Like, just like Shane said, this is not a perfect game. It does have some quality of life issues there, but they're easy to get over and make it past on the way to the end. Getting to the end, the true ending is a little bit of bullshit. But other than that, it's just a fun game, man. It's a phenomenal game, and I really, really do like it. And it absolutely holds up. All right, Keith, take it home.
I'm going to keep it short because I'm basically just going to repeat everything you guys said. In that, yeah, I definitely think it holds up. And I'm just going back to our initial discussion of the gameplay. It is literally like riding a bike. It feels incredibly modern in comparison to the Metroidvanias that are coming out today. And yeah, there are those small little nitpicks. I mean, there's some adjustments that could be done to make this feel a little more up to date, but in the end, it's not game breaking or anything. It's annoying sometimes, but in the end, it's nothing that's going to make you want to put the game down, I don't think. And you know, I didn't get to talk about the map or anything, and I think a lot of modern Metroidvanias really love to jerk themselves off when it comes to level design, and they're always just like, oh, aren't we so clever how we gated this progression here, because you're really going to have to remember to come back to this, and you are kind of aimlessly wandering around trying to find progression in this very over bloated map. Aria of Sorrow isn't that. It always seems like you're progressing to something. Like Chris said, he came across death and was like, is it too soon? No, it's not. That's just how the game wants you to play. It's just so natural. You don't need a walkthrough for this game unless you're trying to get specific items or specific souls. It is the perfect bite-sized, handheld Castlevania game.
With fangs.
I could see some people being like, it's too easy for me. Like, I need something a little more difficult. But I don't see why you would have a bad time jumping into this game if you are a fan of Metroidvanias currently. So yeah, I would definitely say that Aria of Sorrow holds up today.
And for those people who are complaining about the lack of difficulty, I will again point them towards Order of Ecclesia, because fuck that game.
There's always something for you. You can find it. Okay, I guess this concludes our show. Keith, thank you so much for stopping by again. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, record with you. It's always a blast, man.
I do want to say in my final thoughts there, I almost called the game Areola of Sorrow, which is a completely
Who doesn't
different
like
game.
a good areola? Is that a real game?
Could be.
I would be surprised if it wasn't.
A sorrowful areola. I want to see a sad areola.
What makes an areola sad? Does it tear up?
That's the plot of Waifu Discovered 3.
Yeah, I was about to say that just sounds like the title of something you would find on Steam for like $9.99.
Well, hey, thanks for having me and letting me talk about nipples on your podcast. I appreciate it. It's always fun.
Straight to the point. Never mind.
What?
That was cold.
Okay.
Wow.
All right.
I'm not even going to try anymore. I feel like both attempts have failed horribly and just led to confusion. We are all dumber for it. And I will cease. Shane, please carry us out of here before I embarrass myself further.
All right. Well, I mean, so, hey, if you're listening to me right now, that means you didn't just turn this off in disgust. So thanks. Hey, glad you enjoyed the show. If this is your first time around these parts, then we hope you enjoyed your stay, and maybe you should go and check out the rather girthy backlog that we have accumulated at this point. We are dangerously close to 200 pieces of content released on this very feed, which is insane, but we're almost there. So there's a lot of content for you. If you haven't checked it out already, you can check that out, as well as all the other stuff we have for you, whether that happens to be, I don't know, a merch store or Patreon, if you want to support us in that fashion, or maybe you want to check out our socials where we post neat stuff, or maybe our Twitch streams, well, Chris will tell you about in a minute. But all of that can be found in one convenient place. That is our Linktree. So you just got to head to Linktree/Retro Hangover. That is linktr.ee/Retro Hangover. And all our stuff is there. It's just, it's conveniently curated in one spot. You just got to click a button. We did that for you. And that's all our stuff. But before Chris goes and talks about the Twitch streams, I do want to throw it over to our most esteemed guest here. So, Keith, in case the folks at home don't know what it is you do on the internets, what is that and where can they find you?
So I'm the host of the Main Quest podcast, and the very reason you probably come to Retro Hangover is maybe the reason why you want to check out my show, because I also talk about very old video games. The catch with my show, though, is that I am covering games that I played as a child and am covering them chronologically from my very earliest memories of playing video games to, I don't know, like my mid-20s or something. I don't remember what the cutoff point is. So if you are very much into Sega Genesis games, I am currently covering my catalog of Sega Genesis games. I've already covered the Game Boy, the NES, in which, hey, a good place to start are the Castlevania games. I covered the first one, Simon's Quest, and Dracula's Curse. And then I also did a little stint on the TurboGrafx 16, but nobody played that, so, I don't know why you would want to listen to those episodes. But maybe you find something interesting, but...
I'm offended.
Main Quest podcast, you can find all sorts of links, and also, I also have a link tree, linktr.ee/Main Quest pod, and there's all sorts of links on that thing. To where they go, I have no idea, but maybe you got to check it out to see. Find out for yourself. It's an adventure.
Sounds like a great way to have your bank account stolen. So hey, anyway, thanks, Keith. And so Chris, what do we do over on Twitch that's does not involve hot tubs? Is that still a thing? Do they still do that? I don't know.
I have no idea. But I can tell you what we do on our stream Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, US. If you head over to twitch.tv/retro hangover, we stream games. We won't even run ads because we haven't figured out how to be a good affiliate.
We're too lazy.
So, exactly. So head on over there. We'll play games of some type. And I probably will get very angry and rage quit Mario Brothers 3, for example. That could happen. Or maybe a Metroid Fusion. You never know what you're going to get, or you can get scared with Shane on the spoopy games, but you won't know unless you head over to twitch.tv/retro hangover on Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope to see you there.
Fantastic. Well, I suppose with all of that being said, until next time,
play with your prepping vampire sucking joysticks.
Shane here with a quick message. You know, the one rule Chris and I have always gone by regarding advertisements is this: it has to be something we use and can personally vouch for. If you know me, you know I love coffee, and Bones Coffee Company has been my go-to for home brewing for quite some time now. Their small batch beans come in an impressive variety of flavors like Mint Invaders from Chocolate Space, or Electric Unicorn, which I swear tastes exactly like Fruity Pebbles. And the best part? No added sugar or calories involved, just natural flavors infused right into the beans themselves. Build your own sample pack of 5 4-ounce bags to find out which flavors speak to you, or jump in head first with full 12-ounce bags. They've even got K-Cups. Step up your homebrew game with Bones Coffee by visiting bit.ly/RHPBones. That's bit.ly/RHPBONES.